Write in journals to express their feelings and emotions. I make pictures to tell stories. As a conceptual artist, I'm always looking for a unique visual language to share stories from my life. But the stories that I tell are universal. The series Family Matters began when I sold my parents' home and moved them into an assisted living facility. I brought home many of the treasured objects and searched for a way to tell a story about our family. I knew that I didn't want to make just a catalog of objects, but rather a catalog of feelings, emotions, and family dynamics. The objects are frequently paired with other items to create tension and expand the narrative. Though the viewer may not know the exact story behind each image, they will feel the visceral emotion that is embedded into each picture. Repetition of materials also helps enforce the story and feelings. Thread, for example, is a recurring element, indicating a sense of unraveling and the attempt to bind things back together. When an elderly parent with dementia is moved to a new home, they can become confused and ungrounded. My frequent travels back and forth out of state left me feeling equally ungrounded. I was restless and seeking. I wanted to be somewhere else. No matter where I traveled, I always had an aching and a wonder. Could I live here? Is this the place I should be? I quickly realized it wasn't really about the place, but it was about finding contentment inside of myself. The series Somewhere Else addresses this yearning. To create this series, I built a collection of homes and covered them in a wide array of maps. The maps that cover the homes do not reflect the location where the image was photographed. Instead, the map refers to somewhere else, places I had been as a child or hope to go in the future. But of course, that search is an internal one, a constant struggle to find the place that you feel you belong, and the lingering hope you can return to a place that no longer exists or maybe never was. The last act is the unknown. What is the future? What comes next? This year of COVID isolation is obviously a strange one, but I've been grateful just to have time to think and be home. Dealing with a father who is now in hospice, I've been taking some of his images, slides from the 1950s. I am searching for a way to combine his imagery and my ideas. Time will tell where this story leads me.
And that video is sort of still a work in progress, trying to clean up the audio a little bit and such, but we'll let this roll, and I just open the floor to questions if that's the best way to go about this.
Yeah, well, do you want to talk a little bit about Reconstructing Self that's up here? Because that was one of the main bodies of work that I know that, you know, from the beginning, I guess. And then I followed it since then.
Sure. But you know, everything that I do, I think of essentially, and I don't know if this is going to scroll on its own or whether I have to do it. I thought it would go. I'll just randomly hit it forward every now and again. Everything that I work of, I think of as essentially self-portraiture. And this series, Reconstructing Self, is sort of the most obvious visual of me referencing a person, a self, an identity. And I fabricated all of these dresses essentially as a way to tell stories, to illustrate facets of my self-identity, and just use the objects that are paired with them to, again, sort of enhance the storyline and to add further narrative. Which then led into the Family Matters series. Again, each body of work is just really radically visually different, but the continuity is sort of the idea about sharing personal narratives, but also keeping it wide open enough that a viewer can sort of insert themselves into the story because they may have a personal connection with a similar object, or just understand, kind of get the feeling of that emotion from the work. And then the Family Matters series led to the Somewhere Else series because I had sold my parents' house. I was dealing at that time with two parents dealing with dementia, my mother being very confused about where she lived, feeling uprooted, not understanding why she was in a new home, which made me think a lot about home and what is home. And then also me traveling back and forth, I was feeling uprooted. Wherever I went, I sort of just like, oh, I'm so done with LA. Can I live here? I want to be here. And just realizing it was more of a state of mental being more than a state of physical being, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that segued to this project, which is really quite different. But I was invited to do this social engagement project for the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster. And though very different from my work, it was really just a wonderful challenge to do environmental portraits. The museum learned that they were in the district that the museum was in was historically underreporting in the census, and they have significant vulnerable populations. They have a lot of low-income housing. They have a lot of the LA County foster care system is out there. And these are the populations that don't participate in the census, which means they don't get the funding distribution that they need. So they wanted to engage, the museum said, we need to find a project that will engage the community so they understand the importance of the census. And in addition to having art projects that engage the community, bringing in people to work on things together, they asked me to make portraits of people in the community. So primarily I did people at on the street, in businesses, and just at events in town. This fortunately was all done just before COVID. And just tried to connect with the people that lived and worked there. These that are done on the chalkboard, I don't think I have very many represented here, but him, for example, they call them the Tay Youth. It's transitional age youth. So these are kids that are supported by a social services organization. They're graduating or have graduated from the foster system, which basically means you're kicked out of your foster parents' house, and you're on your own now. You're 18, you're on your own. And they have a center where the kids can come and get support, learn how to cook, come in and do their laundry, get their hair cut, because they don't have the skills and resources necessarily, having grown up in the foster program.
So Jane, I'm curious, like how you went from photography to, I mean, not photography, but painting to, and when I first met you, I think we were at the LAAA, and you had said you were a painter and now you're going into photography, and just kind of that whole transition, I think, is interesting.
Sure. That's kind of an interesting, easy answer. I had done some photography in college. I had done the black and white darkroom stuff. And honestly, I just wasn't a darkroom rat. That whole process didn't interest me as much as the image making did. And eventually you buy a little point and shoot camera and you shoot tourist snaps, and that's all I needed at the time. And I had started working in the film industry, and that career sort of swallowed me up. And I really wasn't making any of my own work for quite some time. And when I decided that it was time to come back to my art making practice, I started painting again, and I was doing oil paintings like I had, but I realized I was painting in exactly the same way. It was just sort of like, that's where I left off and that's where I started again. And I didn't really know why. It just felt sort of empty at that point. It felt like a rote process. It wasn't derived from where I was in that moment. And so I kind of was frustrated by that, but I didn't know what else to paint, or I just wasn't finding my voice at that time. But I also thought, well, I'm going to try to get out into the world again, and I'm going to submit some of these to shows. But of course, the time had changed, and now everything was digital submission. It was no longer slide film. And I realized I needed to buy a camera to do take pictures of the paintings. And then I bought a camera just a little bit better than I thought I needed so I could grow into it. And I realized I really had no clue anything about what JPEGs were or RAW was or what file sizes were. I knew nothing. And so at that moment, I said, it's time to take a class. And I enrolled at Art Center in a continuing education photography class and learned how to use my digital camera. And then I never went back. It was just, finally, I found something that was giving me, that I could kind of work in any visual language. It just opened the door to freedom to me, because I can sculpt and still make it a picture. I can just, paint or create or anything. So I'm still exploring and trying to find the right language. And because I get bored easily, that every project I do, I want to find a new visual language for, a new materiality, which keeps it interesting to me, but it also makes it very challenging to create that next project. As I'm in that place now of trying to find a new language to express the ideas that I have in my head, but that look a different way. And I haven't quite figured out for this next project, how do I illustrate these ideas in my head?
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about what they're seeing or any of the bodies?
I do. I would like to see again, there's a picture from the family series that was a vessel wrapped in thorns.
That's
Yeah. Could you talk about that piece?
Of course. This piece is called Regret. This is actually the last one I did in the series. It was the family's sugar vessel. So when you made your coffee, this is where you got your sugar from. Okay. And, sugar is sweet. And a lot of this stuff talks about the family dynamics and the tensions and the relationships. And, my mother and I had a tense relationship for much of our life. And wrapping this sweet sugar vessel in these menacing thorns, to me, really was a way to illustrate some of that dynamic. Also important to me was the handles on the vessel. When merged with the thorns, I start trying to create a little heart shape out of that.
Oh yeah.
So it's that push-pull of the materiality of trying to illustrate and really just give you a physical sensation of painful love, maybe.
I think it's an elegant expression of that. I think I kind of got it without even knowing that that was a sugar bowl.
And I think that's my goal, is that I want you to sort of feel these without necessarily knowing the literal interpretation or the story behind each piece.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have 2 questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
It's really very interesting. I love the houses. Is that the same house, or they're all different? And this is all in camera, not composite, right?
That is correct. I think I have one that repeats in 2 different images, but virtually everyone is a unique house. And yes, they're shot in location. So I've traveled all over the country and brought these with me, and Airbnbs and parks everywhere I went. So
It was probably fun too, right?
I only realized this year, or maybe a few months ago, that, I talk about searching for somewhere else and trying to find that peace and escape. And most of these I was making when I was traveling, or many of them I was making in the Pacific Northwest when I was traveling back and forth to see my parents. And I realized that little hour I would chisel out to go to a park between visiting them at their care facility was my comfort. That was me finding an escape and a piece of place to make those trips more bearable.
Oh yeah, like a little respite from, it was probably very heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Jane, do you show the houses with the photographs, or do you just do the photographs by themselves?
Generally, I did not really want, I guess I show it in the video. Generally, I did not want to show the houses because I liked having the mystery of scale. But the gallerists just love having that object there. So in this show that I have on the screen and at another one that I showed in the video, I did put a house within the display, just because people just love the tactility. They love seeing it. So I was fine with that. I don't want to show every single one, but to have, generally I would pick a model that had been shown in the context. So like when it's in the bed, you already know how big it is. There's no surprise there. But I like to have some mystery. Maybe they're not all small. Maybe some of them are full size. We don't know.
Yeah.
And you made them, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And then another question. Did you figure out, home, where it is, what it is?
No.
Okay.
Well, it seems like Somewhere Else was a precursor to the pandemic and being stuck at home, wishing you were somewhere else there too.
I think it's funny how timely this became. And I sort of wish I could capitalize on it more, but everybody's thinking about being somewhere else. So many people are moving out of urban areas because they realize, yes, I can be somewhere else. I can work remotely. So many people are moving to more rural circumstances, which I dream about as well. And we're all feeling stuck at home, in home. So home is really something we're thinking about more now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The portraits are really striking too.
Thank you. It's an interesting, everything I do is so visually different. And I think it can be confusing for people to look at my work that, Janine knew me as the dresses and all of a sudden I'm doing something totally different. And people who see this work wouldn't connect me to my older work because it's not so visually obvious. But that's kind of critical to me. I'm not the person who can sort of find a style of painting and just keep doing that thing again. And that's probably why I left painting, because I didn't know how to come up with a new visual language as a painter.
Yeah.
Now, Jane, can you talk a little bit about your kind of trajectory from starting at LAAA and then moving on and getting a gallery representation and then also getting into museum collections?
Sure. I mean, I think that I'm feeling a little jaded in this moment.
Okay.
What is success? I don't know, and it's like, no matter what your goals are, it seems like once you get there, it doesn't seem like that was enough or as big of a deal as you thought it might be. But when I came back, I think it was nice to, when I graduated with a master's degree, I was very young and I really didn't know how to navigate the art world at that time. And it was in a pre-internet society that things just weren't as accessible in a way that they think they are now. Just in terms of getting information and such. But I spent the first 2 years just really trying to get myself out in the art world by participating, going to things, volunteering time, helping at nonprofits, organizations, just as a way to get embedded in the art community. And also just submitting like crazy to a lot of different exhibitions. And we do kind of groan at that $35, $45 and going up entry fee. And I just tried to think of it as an advertising expense. And this is what it's going to take for me to just get noticed. So I spent 2 years sort of going, I want to be in a different show every month, and fortunately, I actually managed to have that happen until it gets to the point where like, oh yeah, it seems like you're everywhere. And that helps get you some noticed. And that at a certain point, I dial that back and try to be more selective of being in better shows, better venues, and not just trying to be in anything, everything as I had when I first started. But as a photographer, we certainly have the advantage of being able to participate in things like portfolio reviews. And that's something that I definitely have, has helped me to get, just to, again, to get my work out there, to get connections. And during COVID, it's been nice that some of these have actually happened remotely. So you don't have to travel to present your work. But a portfolio view where you're sharing your work with, sorry, I'm trying to get this thing scrolling again. Sorry,
That's
I'm a
okay.
novice with the, but, you know, I think of being an artist is a huge part of your job, is just doing the promotion and the connections and meeting people and hustling to get your work seen. And it's exhausting. And I certainly question, you know.
I'm interested in what you just said about portfolio review. Peer review is very important. I'm now in a very rural area, and I don't have access to what I used to have with Silver Mine and Women's Caucus for the Arts and other venues where you met artists from other media and you shared your work and so forth. So how are you doing these peer reviews or these portfolio reviews?
I think there's two answers to that question. And I think what you're saying, peer review, is something I think of as like a critique group with your peers. With, let's call them your equals, your fellow photographers, you're talking about your work. And I think that's a really great thing. And it's sort of what you have, it seems like in this group, that you're sharing and talking about your work.
Mm-hmm.
Portfolio review that I'm speaking towards is, and it costs money. And that's, again, you know, the reality of this art world is that it's very expensive to participate in. But portfolio reviews are held by generally nonprofit organizations like Griffith Museum of Photography in Boston, I think has some, LA Center of Photography, the Houston Photo Fest. They're all over the country. So there's going to be one closer to you. I know that Click does one in North Carolina. They have one in Denver. But basically, you, in the past, fly to these venues, stay in a hotel for 2 to 4 days, and you are meeting with 4, 8, 20, depending on the review and how much you pay to get a certain amount of sessions. But you get what I call speed dating, 20-minute sessions with industry professionals, which might be museum curators, gallery directors, book publishers, just independent curators. And you can kind of, maybe they have 30 people, and then you'll prioritize on your list. This is my number 1 hope to see, number 2, number 3, number 4, and you rate them on who you would prefer to meet with. And then you do those 20-minute sessions where you have your work all printed and present the work and have a conversation. Very rarely does anything happen in terms of, you know, I think I know I've had to dial back my expectations of like, I'm going to get discovered. It doesn't happen like that, but it's a long-term relationship. Like Janine and I met in 2014. Well, here 7 years later, she's invited me to show this work. So that's how these things happen, is that you meet somebody once, you keep them on your mailing list. You think, gosh, they didn't like me. And then 4 years later, because you've kept them on your mailing list and you send them cards, you keep them informed of what you're doing, then maybe they'll reach out to you for some opportunity. Or maybe you just have another meeting with them again because they're at another portfolio review and you want to show them what you're doing now. And maybe then they said, oh, I've been following you for 4 years and clearly you're on this trajectory, and now we see something happening. So that's the reality check, is it just doesn't all happen instantaneously.
Thank you, because, you know, sometimes I think I don't want to do pay to play, But you framed it in a different way. You said, no, this is an advertising cost. I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you.
You know, there's so much, trust me, the whole pay to play thing, I get it. You know, we're all having to assess what makes sense, what is the investment. You know, even showing your work is expensive. Just having the work printed and framed, you're covering the cost of that. And if nothing sells at that exhibit, you've just paid to make that happen. It's a real struggle. And we were having a conversation online about, there's something called Shout Out LA, which I know they have other publications in other cities. But basically they say, oh, wow, you're doing so great. We want to do an article on you. And you think, great. And then they send you the list of questions and you basically write the article for them. And there was some chatter on social media lately about how that's just, you're doing all of their work and it gets them followers. It gets them hits to their blog site, which raises money because then people see the advertising. And that people were really out against that. And I'm like, I get that. And I think we all understand that's what it is. But it also is a platform that you write the article. You can say whatever you want. So if there's a message you want to share, maybe it's not so bad. I just think we all have to analyze the opportunities that are out there and decide what we think is worthy. I'm certainly not as eager to spend the $45 submission fee to get one piece in a show across the country that will then cost me $300 round trip to ship it there.
Right. Right.
You know, but I will still do a few because I support that nonprofit organization, or I want that curator to remember my work or whatever. But I think we have to be mindful of the cost and the value. What are we getting out of it? But yeah, it is kind of advertising expenses of just having your work be seen.
And anybody else have questions?
Could you talk about the dress series?
Of course. Is there a question in particular? Something that...
Well, I find them fascinating. Are they life size? And how did you hold all the materials together? And were the actual sculptures part of a show rather than the photography, or as long as the photography is?
Sure. That was a very common question when I was making these. I think I felt pressured at the time, and I think I did one show where I showed the objects and I pretty much hated it. And then I kind of, and I was realizing, no, I have the right as an artist to dictate how my work is shown. But I built them specifically to be photographed. Why did I want them as photos instead of the actual objects? Because trust me, many people are like, I want the sculptures. I want the sculptures. When people came to my studio and saw the sculptures, they're like, oh, that's all it is? Like,
Oh.
no, these were built to be photographed. They're theatrical props. They're not, some of them are just flimsy paper. There's not a whole lot to them. This is just pages from a magazine. There's no structure behind it. It's really primitive. But in this form, the way I photograph it and I control your line of sight, you see the body in there. You feel, I started putting this stuff on the ground because I realized it needed to be grounded.
I like that.
Started adding, when I first was shooting them, I was adding shoes at first. Because I felt like that helped ground the object to the floor, but then it just became too redundant. I can't have everyone in a pair of shoes. It's not really about shoes. So then I realized it could be anything. And it helps fill out the form. It helps you feel that it's anchored to the ground. But then that secondary...
Could you go back to that last one? Yeah, this one.
That's good.
What's on the floor here?
Those are pennies and stacks of coins. So this is called money. When I was a kid, I thought that I became an artist because I didn't want to wear pantyhose. And I thought that having a career meant that you had to have a corporate job. That was to me what work was having pantyhose and going to an office. And I was like, I am not going to do that.
And wearing a bra in August.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to become an artist because I'm not wearing pantyhose. And that's literally, I had no artistic no artistic experience. I wasn't a doodler or a drawer, but I just knew that's my lifestyle. So this piece was sort of speaking to that, how I became an artist.
What are the gels?
They are exactly gels. These are, it's a lighting sample pack of gels that they use in the film industry to.
Oh, I've never seen those.
Yeah. And to me, this is just sort of an homage to stained glass and the beauty of just light.
Yeah.
And this is shot in camera. This was the light projected through the dress, projected the cast shadow onto the wall. So that is not a Photoshop recreation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that.
I like
too.
I have a question then to follow up on the gallery thing and the photo review. Since you have bodies of work that are, like you said, are very diverse, and I see they look like 2-year sections. I mean, what body of work do you decide, or do you do more than one, to bring to like a photo review or to approach a gallery with? I mean, how do you decide? Is it always your latest? And what about your orphans that you finished like 2 years before? I mean, how do you approach that?
Of course. Well, generally, you know, I'm usually most excited about the work that I am making in the moment or that's most recent. So I'll kind of concentrate on the last body of work. Usually what I'll do, and I realize in a portfolio review with 20 minutes, typically I've been advised you should have 20 images in that series. And I just found that it seemed like too many in a meeting in that time to have that many images. So oftentimes I would take that primary body of work and just have maybe 10 or 15 images. But because I wanted that viewer to understand how one project leads from the next, I would also have 2 to 3 to maybe 4 other projects in that box, but maybe only have 5 or 10 images. So I might say, you know, I'm here to show you 3 bodies of work. The first 2 I'm going to show you are done, and I don't really need feedback on them, but I just want you to see what I've done. And then this last body is the more current, and I'm still working on it. So this is where I'd really like to focus the conversation. So you can kind of direct what you want out of it. And then because you may be meeting with people of a very diverse interest, one person doesn't want to see social documentary at all, but the other one does. I may have multiple projects sort of tucked in the back of the box that I know when I get to that person, I'm going to pull out that work that doesn't make sense for anybody else.
Yeah.
So I think having the more that you can show, the better. It doesn't mean you have to show it all, but if you get to a conversation where they are not relating to anything you've just shown them, then you've got something else that maybe they'll connect with.
Jane, have you ever been in one of those portfolio reviews and completely got shot down by somebody?
Yes, I had, certainly there's more than one, you know, where people just don't get what you're doing. And there was one woman, and she was French, and she was just like, oh, this is blah, 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 blah. And it was just like so negative. And I was just like, okay, you know, what are you going to do? She just doesn't connect. And then other artists I talked to, it's like, oh my God, she was so rude. And, you know, it wasn't just me. It was like everybody she met. And it's like, there's just those people. I had one person that didn't show up and they had somebody else sit in. And he was a fellow artist. He spent the whole time talking about the work he made. You know, it's just like, yeah, you're going to get some duds. And it's like, oh, I just paid $50 for that. Great, thanks. Yeah. But it is what it is. And sometimes you look at the list and the person that was the top of your list, you're so excited you got, and then you end up with just a completely flat meeting. And then the person that you were sort of like, oh, I can't believe I got stuck with that person, ends up to be, you just have a dynamic conversation, you get interesting feedback. So you just don't know.
Yeah.
What was the most useful feedback that you received on one particular photograph?
I think, you know, I'm Jonathan Blaustein is one, and I showed him this body of the dresses when it was very early. And I don't remember, I mean, that was 7 years ago. I don't remember specifically what he said, but when a reviewer can ask you questions that make you push your work further, when they challenge you is the best review possible for me, because reviewers who just, yeah, we all want to get opportunities in shows, but I also want to learn and make better work. And when they push you to, why are you doing that? Are the shoes enough? Should you be showing it this way? Should you be showing it that way? And sometimes if we're sensitive, that can be really hard criticism to hear. Or you go, thank you for pushing me further because I was struggling with this work and now I have a better understanding of why it isn't working. So I think reviewers we go to the review table for more than one reason. And sure, it is about finding opportunity. But I almost find it more exciting when a work is in progress, when you have something that you're still working on that you can actually get feedback for, because the reviewers want to give feedback. And if they start criticizing projects that were done 3 years ago, you're like, I'm not going to come back and change that work.
Yeah.
So that's not really helpful to me right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have stuff that sort of, sometimes it's fun to say, look, this is just brand new stuff I'm playing with. What do you think about this direction? To have something that's you're more available to get that kind of feedback is helpful.
Jane, have you gotten any feedback on your newest body of work with your dad's slides?
No, because it doesn't even exist yet.
Okay. Still in the experimental stage.
I don't know about the rest of you, but usually I am so self-motivated and so busy. And this year of COVID, I am just paralyzed. I have not been, I'm farting around. I am like making myself do stuff like cyanotypes. And I mean, through the year, I did the macro photography of insects. I did some night photography. I did some cyanotypes. I've done some pigment transfers. I'm playing with his slides. I'm compositing things, and I hate all of it. It just all feels, everybody started COVID, all the photographers, they were doing, I'm going to take pictures of people standing on their doorsteps. I'm going to do still lifes. I'm going to do flowers. And it's like, I just can't jump on that just because it's all that we have to do right now. And I don't know, I'm just feeling the COVID brain fog, and I don't even have COVID. And I'm just trying to, because I had been so busy for so long, just trying to give myself permission to be like, all right, I'm just thinking right now. I'm going to spend a year off and just think. And at some point, I sit in my bed in the morning and I go, I've got to come up with that idea. What is that idea? And it never works that way. All of a sudden I'll be in the shower, I'll see the whole project, and I'm just waiting for that day to come, because I can't just sit here and make stuff for the sake of making it when I don't know what the idea is.
Yeah. Don't push the river.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that magical moment in the shower where I just see what that next project is, because I know what the ideas are. I know what I'm thinking about, but I don't know what it looks like, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that, because I have the same thing. All of a sudden I'll be in the shower and that's where the idea comes.
Always in the shower, and I see the whole thing. I mean, I just know exactly what, and then it's like, oh, I know what to do. And here I've had this fabulous year of like a lot of free time, and God, I could be making so much work if I knew what that work was. And it's like, it's a horrible place to be, this limbo that I'm in.
Yeah. Now, was your father a photographer?
He was an amateur photographer. So I have his old 50 Rolleiflex. So, I don't know how good he was, but he liked it. And he did the darkroom work, and he always dreamed of building a custom house with a darkroom in it. And he never did. So sort of, he was a scientist that, wanted to be a photographer, I think.
Yeah.
Do you ever do just like one photograph that isn't part of a huge collection? Or is it always?
But to me, it's really about making bodies of work. It's about making series. It's about continuity of an idea.
Okay.
And Jane, do you find that gallerists prefer like a full body of work versus kind of one-offs of a lot of different things?
Yes. It almost seems like, from the experience I've had, it almost seems like a necessity. Like when you meet at a portfolio review, they want to see a finished series. They want to see complete ideas.
What's the minimum number of photographs for a series, would you say?
the general rule of thumb is 20 to 25, but if you can make it in 10 to 15, then it's 10 to 15. I don't think, rules are guidelines. I don't think there's a must, but I would think you'd want at least 10.
Anybody else have any questions? Jane?
I guess one more COVID related question. How have you found, or have you thought about, I don't know how it is in California, how have you found places to show? I mean, all these bodies of work, or even what you're thinking in the future. I mean, are you showing online, or do you see that's the future way of exhibiting these pieces?
Well, honestly, 2020, I had a whole lot of stuff lined up at the beginning of the year. So solo show, museum shows in February of 2020, which one after the other closed doors early. Basically, shipped work home, stuff just wasn't getting seen, or, and it really, I think that really put me in a funk of just like the Somewhere Else series. I was sort of debuting. It debuted in January, and then I had stuff lined up for the beginning of the year, and that was the intention, was to spend 2020 showing this work, and then it just stopped. And then I think it's just sort of had this psychological impact of like, this work is a failure, it didn't get out there, and it's like, no, it's COVID. And I realized like, okay, it still has a life. I just have to wait a year till it makes sense, and then I'll start. So I am lining up stuff for future. But I really just went underground for most of 2020 after I flew home from a museum show in South Carolina at the end of February. I was like, I'm done, I'm staying home, and I just went underground and barely left the house since then. And I've done a few things online just to be present, but I just decided this isn't the time. It's okay to have this break, and I'll figure it out later, I guess.
Have you thought about doing Somewhere Else COVID edition?
It's like once I finish, I don't know if you mean like making new work based on.
Yeah, making new work based on it.
Something, I don't know why, but I'm just like, I'm on to the next thing, and I don't really enjoy going backwards. I don't want to make another dress. I don't really want to make another house.
Yeah.
If I figure out like, oh, here's what didn't go well with this project, I want to make it better in the next one, but it will look totally different. So I don't know why, but I just, once I'm done with it, I'm done with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, does anybody else have any more questions for Jane? If not, Jane, do you have any questions for us being on a different coast?
Well, not really. I think it's great to know that you guys are doing this, that there's, I love hearing that you can be a little bit more rural. You don't have to be inside a major city to make your careers happen. I think we're all thinking a lot about, where do we live and what makes, how to find our community. I've been really researching moving somewhere rural, and having online platforms where we can communicate in this way really does open up the possibility that you don't have to be in the heart of New York or the heart of LA to make a career happen. But hopefully I will be coming to the East Coast. I think this work will go to the Griffin. And then the Family Matters is going to go somewhere else in Massachusetts, hopefully the year following. So I am starting to get some stuff lined up, and dreaming of traveling again, right?
Great. You've gotten both your vaccines, right?
I've had the first, so we're 2 weeks away from the second. Okay. It's just, I'm trying so hard to be ethical and responsible citizen and keep people safe. But also my dad's in hospice and like sort of desperate to fly to go to see him while we still can. So I booked a ticket for 2 weeks after my second vaccine, but then I keep reading the news and they're like, do not travel, do not go anywhere, don't come back to California. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know I just figured the ticket's there and I can change it.
Yeah, that makes it hard.
We'll see it's like, I don't feel like it's safe, wise, smart, kind to other people to travel right now. But I also like, he doesn't got much time.
Yeah.
So I'm just torn on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the nice part about being in Connecticut is we are just outside of New York. So we do have the access to the New York, market if we so choose, which is nice. But Connecticut does have a pretty vibrant arts scene as well. So
Maybe I'll find a way to come out and see what your scene is up and visit you.
yeah,
When I can get free, that would be lovely. So
yeah, definitely. We would love to have you out and visit and invite you to one of our big meetings so you can meet all 150 of us.
wow, that's an impressive group. So
Well, this is not just, there's just a small portion of the local artists that are part of the collective. There's a wait list to get in, and it's a pretty vast art scene out here for not a major hub, I guess. So,
what city are you in proper?
we're in actually all different cities in the collective. So I'm in Fairfield, Barbara and Mary are in Ridgefield, Gay, you are Brookfield, right?
Winstead.
Oh, Winstead. And then Lynn is in Westport. Suzanne, who is joining us, is Westport, and she's also in Florida, I think, right now.
Ridgefield. She lives in Ridgefield.
That's right.
Lots of fields in Connecticut.
Don't forget Normal.
Oh, Norm, are you on here too?
Yeah. I got the wrong time, so I was a little late.
Okay. And Norm is our photorealistic painter who's joining us as well.
Hi, Norm.
I'm
And
just totally impressed. Not only with what you do, but with what you say.
Oh, well, thank you.
I
Thank you.
agree.
Yeah.
I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna unshare if I can get to that so we can see each other.
there we go.
Yeah.
Notice my new haircut, everybody.
And Norm has a painting behind him, which every week
Which he won't show.
Oh, backwards. Oh, what a toughie.
No, well, being a photorealist, it ain't like snapping the shutter. It's like takes months and months and months to do. And no, I was very impressed with your work. I went to your website on the suggestion of Janine's email, and I was really blown away.
Oh, well, thank you.
In fact, a lot of the stuff, they were very painterly.
Well, I'm a trained painter, so
Well, I sort of got that feeling from, especially the still lives that you did.
yeah. I'm fortunate because it's like I don't think about composition, I just see it. I don't have to think about framing because it's either right or it isn't. And I know some people that doesn't come naturally to, and color, it's just like, it's just there. It's nice to have it so ingrained that I don't have to.
I do wish I could find something to disagree with you about.
Well, you will. You'll think of it
No,
later.
you're the only one. I mean, it's really terrific. And the artists that we're on every week are just terrific. And, we appreciate you being on. I wish to God I broke down 5 o'clock and not 5:30.
Yeah. Well, Jane, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to talk to everybody about your work. And it was good to see you, even though it's Zoom and not in person. And hopefully, please let us know when you have your show at the Griffin, because we're within driving distance of, Boston area and Massachusetts. So I'll definitely put the word out that your show is on out here too.
Wonderful. And all of you feel free to connect on Facebook or Instagram. Just love to connect with more artists. So it's awesome what you guys are doing, and thanks for the invitation to talk.